is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer, fansided.com. As you can see, I'm joined today by nobody because I'm flying solo like a cub. Yes, Cody Williams, content director, fansided.com, is probably a few miles away from me right now, doing bachelor party things, allegedly. I might run into him at some point this weekend. He may meet the Arizona State podcast, but the Red Sox are here playing the Braves, so he's got to do that first. But I've got a very exciting show for you guys today. A lot of stuff transpired over this past weekend in Destin for the winter meet or the spring meetings with the coaches and Commissioner Sankey and everything like that. So it really did a number on impacting the college football world today. So without further ado, let's get started with our first and 15 with "It Don't Mean Enough." Greg Sankey seems to be incredibly comfortable wearing the black hat in trying to grow or kill college football. The longtime SEC commissioner uh, clapped back at the ACC and the Big 12 for supposedly pushing back on the new format for the college football playoff. It seemed as though Jim Phillips of the ACC led a very, I'm trying to think what the word is, a very soft like response about it, and the Big 12 didn't have one. So maybe Sankey's making things up, probably, but it's very clear that the Power Four is becoming the Power Two, with the SEC and the Big Ten pulling away from the Big 12 and the ACC. And this was always going to be the case. The biggest and best college football brands are in those two conferences, whereas the Big 12 is still trying to find itself, and the ACC, for better words, is historically a basketball conference with a few key brands. Again, I don't think that we're going to be splitting off, from college or the NCAA at its entirety. I mean, there may be threats to do that, but they kind of feel empty from where I'm sitting at this point in time. But I think Sankey's been asked, like, do you want to be the sports czar? He says, well, a czar didn't work in Russia 110 years ago, and it didn't work with the with drugs back in like the 80s. So maybe the czar is the wrong word, but that all, that derives from the word Caesar. They're all, I'm trying to think what else. There's other words. Like it's all basically the same root word of like Kaiser. Yeah, it's all the same word. But anyway, it's got to the point with Greg Sankey where he's like, yeah, I'm going to say or do whatever I want, and there's really nothing you can do about it. I mean, all he's really done is make the SEC better since taking over for Mike Slive. I mean, we've seen the league go from 12 teams to 16 teams with the additions of Missouri and Texas A&M in 2012, and then the additions of Oklahoma and Texas in 2024. Obviously, by taking those four schools from the Big 12, it set into motion a lot of conference realignment. Then obviously the Big Ten did a bunch with Kevin Warren. And obviously Tony Petitti is kind of the guy who's overseeing it now. Brett Yormark's now the commissioner of the Big 12, and Jim Phillips of the ACC. So those are kind of like really the four power brokers, along with Pete Bavacqua over there at Notre Dame, representing the National Independent Power over there in South Bend. So I know a lot of people are really mad and a lot of people are really pissed at Greg Sankey. And even though, I root for an SEC team, I can understand where they're coming from. College football special. College football is the best sport on the planet. College football is the one thing that, ties me back to my alma mater, ties me back to being, a dumb 18 to 23-year-old. Um, you know, my connection to the University of Georgia is the football team in my fraternity. And also the city of Athens, which I'm going to be going to here in about a month. So I'm really excited about that. Again, always try to go back once a year, even if it's in the summer. But it's college football is just incredibly special to so many people. And anytime that that's going to be messed with or monkeyed with, kind of like what we've seen with the NFL, people don't like that. Like there's a reason why I'll say if anybody likes both sports, they like college football more. Just because, it's about the kids. The kids keep it fresh. Anything and everything can happen. Yes, we know that the teams at the top of college football, whether that would be the Georgias, the Ohio States, the Alabamas of the world, the ones who always recruit well, the ones who always perform well, they're always going to. But where I think people find a lot of joy is, there's teams out there that are never going to win a national championship. Like I don't think Iowa's ever going to win a national championship. Michigan State may not. You're looking at what Arkansas may not in this current day and age. Oregon still hasn't. West Virginia never has. But that doesn't mean that those schools and those programs can't not ever do it one day, or can't like they can't not have good seasons. Like they're going to. They're going to have years that their fan bases, their alumni, the players, the coaches, they're all going to have just a fantastic time. But I don't think it's good for the sport for people to, of like the 120, 160 Division One teams where there's really only 40 teams that can compete for a championship. In reality, that's kind of what it is. And it's probably less than that. But like to deny everybody from having an opportunity, whether or not that opportunity is real or not, you can't do that. That was the whole point of college football playoff expansion. It wasn't to necessarily get like the four best teams in there or get the 12 best teams. It's like, okay, let's get like let's get what we actually want. We're going to still arrive at the same result more often than not, but the way that we're going to do it is going to be more on our terms. I think Bill Connolly for ESPN, who was the main focal point for what Monday's show, yeah, Memorial Day show. It's all confusing this week. Who knows what day it is? It's almost the end of May. And it's going to be June here soon. So, wow, that rhymes. Anyway, like what I'm getting at with all this is you want everybody to have an opportunity to compete. You don't want to have people to feel that like their season and their what they hold so special doesn't matter anymore because it does. There have been a lot of teams out there over the years that weren't going to win a national championship, but were like maybe contending for it, but made the sport better. Like yeah, I loved seeing Georgia be in the college football playoff last year after missing it 23. Didn't work out as well for the Dogs as I would have hoped, but like I thought it was cool that Indiana got in there. I thought it was cool that SMU got in there. I thought it was cool that Boise State showed it could play with the big boys. I thought it was amazing that Arizona State had the season they did. And maybe in time, like maybe Indiana, SMU, and Arizona State will continue to stack up these great seasons year after year after year to eventually become like, how we view Boise State or how we view Oregon. Prior to 2000, what was Boise State? Prior to what 95, really what was Oregon? Like you get the right coach, you build on top of it. And maybe Kenny Dillingham is that for Arizona State. Maybe Rhett Lashley is that for SMU. Maybe Kurt Signetti is that for Indiana. It looks like it, but how long is the runway? He's in his early 60s. But I don't think we really need to harp in Greg Sankey as much as we are. I think people hate feeling marginalized. They hate authoritative figures and everything like that. But you got to take charge. Somebody's going to take charge, and the NCAA hasn't done that. I can sense that like incoherent scheduling, people wanting to play non-conference games, some conferences not having enough, teams and schools not being punished for playing tough games where others are rewarded for not doing so. It's all a mess. And frankly, that's kind of what I love about college football. It doesn't have to make sense. It's, you know, you try to make it make sense in the NFL and it still feels rigged. You still feel like, oh, the Chiefs and the Eagles are going to win it every year. This past year in college football, it's like, oh, there's about 8 teams that could do it. And one of the 8 teams that could do it, probably the eighth team to do it, Ohio State did do it. So, maybe you have as many teams that can win a national championship, that can win a Super Bowl in a year. Just your amount of teams is wider. You're instead of 32, you're dealing with what? I don't know, 6 times that, 5 times that? Yeah, probably 5 times that. Like there's more to be spread around. That's why there's so much variance in the games that are played. I always say this, the best team in the NFL, let's just say the Eagles, hosting the worst team in the NFL, let's say that's the Saints. The Eagles are probably only going to be laying 17 points at home to the Saints. Whereas if you take the best team in the SEC, Georgia or Texas, and you take the worst team in the SEC, Kentucky or Mississippi State, you play that game at home, in either between the hedges or a DKR. I mean, the Dogs or the Horns are going to be laying what, 30 plus points to Mississippi State or Kentucky? Like the range is that significant. And that's even in the supposed best conference. Look, we got to get some guardrails on this thing. The NIL stuff, we'll talk about that here shortly. It's getting out of hand. The sport's evolving, the sport's changing. It may be becoming more like the NFL, but the NFL is becoming more like the WWE. So The only constant in the world is change, and you better be ready for it. So that's all I've really got about there with it. Don't mean enough with Greg Sankey, just wearing the black hat, being the villain. I think he can handle it, and not everybody can. I buy into it, but I don't know if it's for the best interest of the sport, but he's doing it. Moving on to our next topic, let's do some playoffs. You kidding me? One of the things that was touched on in and around the meetings down there in Destin is a potential 5+11 playoff for, whenever the future does come. We obviously have a 12 team format for the 25-26 season. There will not be reseeding in it. So it'll be, the four highest ranked conference champions, or I think the five highest ranked conference champions, and yeah, the 11 best teams. Essentially, that's kind of what we're looking, but like we'll be adding four more teams, the 5-11. We're kind of more with a 5-7, I think now. So yeah, that's a little bit of word salad. I'm gonna take a sip of coffee here and try to get my brain straight here. This is gonna be a very challenging episode for me because it's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of thinking stuff very early in the morning for me. Okay, so basically the way that the 5-11 format works is it's the five highest ranked champions. So the winner of the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the SEC, and the group of five all get in. And they'll be seated accordingly, somewhere between 1 and 16. And then you'll have 11 at large teams. This will be, this could include Notre Dame. This could include any team in any other league. It doesn't particularly matter. It's just the 11 next best teams in college football, so to speak. This runs counter to what the 4+4+2+2+1+3, where like you have the automatic qualifiers. So I've done models, a 16 team model with that one, and what that would look like. And I figured, might as well, since we got a new idea out here, let's get my brain going a little bit more, and I'll share with you who I think would make the playoff this year in an 11 and a 5+11 model. So again, five highest ranked champions, 11 at large teams seeded no matter what. Probably the worst Power 5 or Group of Five champion will be 16. So moving down here, I'm gonna go in quarters here, 1 through 4. So at 1, I've got Penn State winning the Big Ten. At 2, I have Clemson winning the ACC. 3, I have Georgia winning the SEC. And 4, I have Ohio State as the first at-large team. This isn't a lot different from what I did in the previous model or the previous machination of this. The big difference is I've kind of swung back, and I think that Georgia might be a little bit better than Texas. Not by much, but they beat them both times last year. Neither of those games were in Athens. Both teams are starting new quarterbacks this year with Quinn Ewers going to the NFL and Arch Manning replacing him in Texas. Carson Beck going to Miami and Gunnar Stockton taking over from within. I think Texas has a little bit more challenging schedule because they got to go play at Ohio State to start the year. Georgia's schedule is still tough, but a lot of their road games from a year ago that are tough are now at home. You're getting Alabama at home. You get Texas at home. You get Ole Miss at home. Yeah, you got to play on the road at Tennessee, but Tennessee's not the same team we thought with Joey Aguilar and others vying to replace Nico Iamaleava at quarterback. And then, maybe Florida will be better. Auburn will be better. Those are going to be tough games as well. But, I've always said that, like, well, Georgia hasn't lost a home game since 2019 to South Carolina. And, until proven otherwise, I think Georgia's going to hold serve between the hedges. So that means Texas will lose there. Texas will have two losses, maybe one of which will only be an SEC play to Georgia. But you'd have the head-to-head tiebreaker in some capacity. Then it kind of comes down to like, okay, are you going to get to Atlanta and face each other? And in that situation, it could go either way. For a while there, I'd said, okay, maybe Texas wins that game. Right now, I don't think so. But like again, I have Texas coming up here very shortly. But that's the guys who have the top four: Penn State winning the Big Ten, Clemson winning the ACC, Georgia winning the SEC, and Ohio State as the first at-large team. 5 through 8, I've got Texas as an at-large team at 5, Notre Dame as an at-large team at 6, Arizona State as the Big 12 champion at 7, and Oregon as an at-large team at 8. Again, there's a little bit of movement across the board when we go to this 5-11 model or 11-5. I haven't been able to figure out how I want to say it. I think it's 5'11". Let's just do that. Not 6 feet, 5'11". That's what that is. Most certainly not 5'9". Yeah. Imagine if we go into a 5'9" model with 14, the amount of jokes that would happen. But again, these are all teams that I feel very comfortable having in and around the top eight. Texas may be a lock to make the playoff more so than Georgia, but I don't know. They're right there. And in the same cluster that I've had Georgia for a while, I've had Notre Dame and Oregon right there as pretty much going to get in, and then Arizona State as well. I view Arizona State kind of like Texas, where like I think they're the most likely team in their respective Power Four league to make the playoff, but I don't necessarily know if they're going to win their conference. I've come around more on Arizona State winning over Iowa State, BYU, Kansas State, etc. at this point. So I feel very confident that the Sun Devils get back. But I think looking at this cluster, 5 through 8, again, these are all teams that would be having first round home games. And again, you have to remember this playoff model is not what we're going to be using this year. It's just going to go to 12. It's not going to go to 16. But I'm just doing this for the sake of argument of what it could potentially look like. I think in this way, like you have to almost like protect the teams that win their conference in an at-large situation. Like I almost feel like if you win the Big 12 or ACC in most years, like last year Clemson wasn't most years, but like maybe Arizona State did not have the pedigree, maybe the Big 12 was down a little bit, but like if you win your league, you should be a top 8 seed. You should be able to have a home first round home game for a first round game at home. There we go. Tongue twister right there. Yeah, I told you this episode's gonna be off the rails even without Cody. Got to talk twice in a little bit faster time. But anyway, like I feel like Arizona State in this situation has to be top 8. I feel like anything else is, you're rewarding somebody else for not playing in their conference championship game, let alone winning it. And I would like to hope that the selection committee will take that into account. I can't always guarantee that that will be the case, but we can only certainly hope so. So again, 5 through 8 are Texas, Notre Dame, Arizona State, and Oregon. So your 8 teams that would be hosting first round games would be Penn State, Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Notre Dame, Arizona State, and Oregon. Sounds like fun. Okay, let's move the bottom half of this. 9 through 12. Let's go with South Carolina as an at-large at 9, LSU an at-large at 10, Iowa State an at-large at 11, and Alabama an at-large at 12. Again, a little bit of maneuvering from where things were previously. This moves up, the likes of Alabama. Maybe Iowa State goes down a little bit. And again, I think like you're kind of you're splitting hairs when it comes to South Carolina and LSU. It's kind of like a matter of preference. I think most people looking at it how the SEC is right now, it's Georgia or Texas, 1, 2 in some order. I may be in the minority. I may have Georgia at 1, but like Georgia's beat them twice in a row, and you kiss my ass. Then, as far as like South Carolina and LSU, a lot of people really like Garrett Nussmeier. A lot of people really love Lenore Sellers. They're going to play each other. Whoever wins that game head to head, that game will be in Baton Rouge. Could decide who gets the higher seed here. But like, as much as I'd like to have them both potentially above 9 and in the top 8, that may not necessarily be the case. And I think that's the other thing here is Iowa State at 11. And I'll talk about Iowa State at 11 and Alabama at 12. If I have Iowa State projected to be the runner-up to win the Big 12 in this situation, like they're gonna make it. Like it doesn't matter if like they're gonna be out. Like the basically like if you're in a 16 team model, like if you finish in second place in a Power Four conference, you're gonna make it pretty much. I mean, and even if you mess up there, like third place is going to be right there too. So like last year, Iowa State may not have made it, but BYU would have gotten in. So that would have been the case. If Clemson would have lost to SMU, then Miami would have gotten in, or Miami would have been the other at-large or automatic qualifier in that situation. So 16 does get an equal or a fair enough representation of the college football conferences as a whole. Yes, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to have more than the ACC and the Big 12, but that's just the nature of the beast, and that shouldn't really surprise you. Alabama being at 12, that may be a little bit of SEC bias, but like you're looking at it from the perspective of maybe they played a tougher schedule than other teams behind them. Maybe they just have better players. Maybe they caught fire at the right part of the year. Things of that nature. There will be at some point in this potential 5-11 format, like a 9-3 at-large team in the SEC being inside the top 12. Like be prepared for that. Be prepared for a couple of three-loss teams to make it outside of what Clemson did last year by winning the ACC. So that's who I've got there from 9 to 12. And then to close it out, 13 through 16, I've got Illinois at 13 as an at-large, Miami at 14 as an at-large, Indiana at 15 as an at-large, and Boise State at 16 as your group of five champion. I look at those four teams, and if you want to group Alabama and Iowa State in there, like the bottom, like outside the top 10 there, that feels right to me. There's things that all six of those teams do that I don't think anybody else who's vying for a playoff spot at this time have. You know, Iowa State's got a strong head coach in Matt Campbell, a team that's played in a conference championship a year ago, a team that has a future franchise quarterback in Rocco Becht. Things are looking up there for the Clones. Alabama may have a new quarterback in place, but they've recruited very well. Both under Nick Saban and Kalen DeBoer. Play a tough schedule, big brand. In this situation, like something has to go horribly wrong for them not to make it. Illinois, proven head coach in Brett Bielema, a team that's on the rise. Luke Altmaier is a quarterback that's really starting to make noise. They're in that upper third of the Big Ten, and I think if you're in that upper third of the Big Ten, you're going to get in. More likely than not. I mean, there will be the team that finishes sixth, whether that would be Michigan or Iowa or Washington. That's kind of where I'm leaning for that. But the Illinois and the Indianas will be rewarded for getting, in that next tier below the Ohio States, Oregons, and Penn States. Um, Miami, you've got Carson Beck. You've got a very strong recruiting class. The whole Miami program, they've just recruited very well. Don't trust Mario Cristobal at all, but Shannon Dawson's a fantastic offensive mind. The ACC is very much up for grabs outside of Clemson, and I think Miami just has. I don't know if they're the best coach team. I don't know if they're going to do it, but they certainly have the most firepower to potentially catch Clemson. Indiana's been there before. Kurt Sagan is a fantastic coach. You might have actually upgraded at quarterback with Fernando Mendoza coming in to replace Curtis Rourke. And Indiana, I don't think it's going to fall off that much this year. They're not going to be as good, but they're going to win about 10 games and probably be in the mix as well. And then Boise State. We know what Spencer Danielson is a head coach. We know what Maddox Madsen is a quarterback. This is a program pulling with a lot of confidence in the Mountain West. Outside of Colorado State, I think the league for that they play in is going to be down considerably. If he's going to pull back with Dan Mullen replacing Barry Odom. We'll see if Fresno figures it out. But like somebody else may emerge. Maybe Air Force has a good year. But right now, you're looking more and more likely that the top of the Mountain West is going to be Boise State, Colorado State, and I'm going to take Boise State every day and twice on Sunday. So that's kind of what I've got here for my projected 5+11 for 2025-26. Again, it's 5-7 for this year, but I'll rattle it off here, and I'll just say the matchups. So your 1 versus 16 in this spot would be Penn State hosting Boise State. That's a rematch of this past year's Fiesta Bowl. That could be fun. It could also be a snooze fest. 2-15, you've got Clemson hosting Indiana. Brad Brownell, eat your heart out. 3 versus 14, Georgia hosting Miami. Carson Beck might lose his first game between the hedges. Oh my God. That'd be awful if Georgia lost that game, but that's not happening. It'd be cool though if it did, but it won't. 4 versus 13, we got Ohio State hosting Illinois. Yeah, we're gonna play for some Illinois. Yeah, that'd be amazing just to see like Brett Bielema or Ryan Day hosting that turtle. That's crazy. They made a trophy. The trophy was actually a turtle to basically symbolize the length and the tradition of the rivalry. That's not played that regularly anymore. But when they first did it, they had a turtle, and the turtle died the first year. And then they made a plastic turtle or something, or a wooden turtle, and now he's Illinois for Illini and Buckeyes. Gotta love college football. 5-12, Texas hosting Alabama. Love that. Don't we all? 6 through 11, you got Notre Dame hosting Iowa State. Marcus Freeman versus Matt Campbell. Those two coaches, could be moving on to bigger and better things. Maybe Marcus Sherman goes to the NFL. Maybe Matt Campbell goes to USC. I think that might happen. 7-10, Arizona State versus LSU, and in Tempe. There's not going to be any alcohol left after that game. And then 8-9, Oregon hosting South Carolina. That's going to be an absolutely fun game. Maybe we'll see it, but that's kind of what I got right there for playoffs. You kidding me? Let's move on to our next topic with where's the money, Lebowski? Kirby Smart said, at the meetings down in Destin, the SEC meetings down in Destin, that some of the top high school players in the country, are getting $20,000 a month to stay committed. And I wrote about this for fansided.com. And I think people are saying like, oh, Kirby is just, bitching and moaning about the fact that Georgia's not getting all the top recruits in the world. That's not what this is about. We saw something very similar not that long ago when Hugh Freeze was calling the shots there at Ole Miss. Ole Miss was recruiting out of its mind, landing the likes of Robert Kimdiche, Laquan Treadwell, and Laramie Tunsil. Like they never recruited at that level. Turns out it was kind of illegitimate. That cost him his job. Cost him a bowl game. Matt Rhule came in, didn't work, he stabilized a little bit, and then Lane Kiffin took over. But what Kirby Smart is saying is that there are recruits out there in high school that when they've committed these collectives as like a conduit of the university or on the side are paying these players money to not just like come to their school, but to stay committed and stay silent. To not waver on this. So, and again, like I'm not going to put any team on blast or anything like that, but this is very seedy. Like Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports did a write up on this. He does a great job of explaining the complicated. And I try to dumb it down even more so you guys can digest it. Basically, what's happening now, entering year 5 of NIL, is they're looking to create some sort of guardrails. There's going to be a Deloitte run clearinghouse that's going to basically audit and see like, are all these like collectives and everything like that, like the money that these recruits are getting, is it legit? Like we're kind of going into the FDIC of this. And because like there may be some stuff out that's like, oh, we're going to give you $8 million to come to the school. Oh, we're not going to give you anything. And I wrote about this, and like I keep thinking that maybe Kirby Smart was because I remember last year, Jaden Rashada spent 1 year at Georgia, didn't play, but his recruitment out of high school, out of Pittsburgh, California, was absolutely wacky. He kind of got sucked into the John Ruiz life wallet thing at Miami, didn't stick. Then he goes to Florida for more compensation. That didn't work. And then he gets out of his NLI, his National Letter of Intent. Then he goes and he plays for his father's alma mater of Arizona State. Sun Devils were awful that year. They went 3-9. He transfers, he comes to Georgia. And then he sues, some parties there in Florida, including Billy Napier and I think former recruiting director and the guy of the collective that didn't pay him. Now he's going to like I think Sacramento State, so maybe he wasn't that great to begin with. Maybe he just wants to play. But like I think when you're near and around something that's bad that's happened to somebody who's just a kid, who may have gotten caught up in some tough stuff with family or what have you, that resonates because I mean, what Kirby Smart's a father. Kirby Smart's got 3 kids. They're like teenagers or preteens, if you will. Like there's, it's they're only a few years away for if they're a great athlete and they're dealing with some stuff like this. Think about it from that perspective. Nico Iamaleava supposedly got 8 million to go to Tennessee over 4 years. Wanted to go back and renegotiate. Tennessee says, you're not that good. And he says, yes, I am. And then he goes and he signs for 40% of what he was already making to go play for his home state's UCLA Bruins. Westwood's not that far from Long Beach. But like this clearinghouse, and again, like I don't understand exactly how this all works. I just know Deloitte's a Big Four accounting firm. The other thing is, I think Trev Alberts, the AD at Texas A&M, said like, there may be more dirty money being pushed under the table than you would think. I don't know if he was saying that like, as a guilty party or not, but like he was saying like this may not account for all the transactions that are happening. And again, the university is not paying these kids. It's a collective that's, adjacent to the university. They can funnel cash in there. And I know that Governor Kemp here at Georgia says that NIL is not going to be taxed, it's going to be tax exempt because they people have used that against Georgia in recruitment as a state that has state income tax, whereas like three states in the SEC footprint, whether that be Tennessee, or whether that be Texas, and whether that be Florida, don't have to pay income tax. So, and again, I'm not going to throw like any of these other teams under the bus because again, I don't know. But it is very concerning to think like, okay, so you're giving a 17-year-old but upwards of $20,000 a month. If you just stay committed and just keep your mouth shut, you're going to make almost $250,000 in a year, free of tax. Is the kid gonna get all that? Are the parents gonna get it? Do we gotta put a Jackie Coogan law in here so that people aren't gonna steal his money? We gotta protect these kids, man. And at that point, like, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't matter what anybody's like net worth is, but like, I don't know how I would handle $250,000 coming to me in a year in essentially a salary. Imagine if you're getting paid bi-weekly. You're getting paid $10,000. You get paid weekly. You're getting paid $4,000 as an 18-year-old, as a 17-year-old. You can't even legally vote, and you're pulling in almost $250,000. Look, I understand it's the market's all about what somebody's going to pay you. I'm all for free market enterprise. I don't think we need to have caps or restrictions or anything like that. But at the same time, you got to ask these people who are these big pocketed boosters who are funneling cash to these collectives, do you really, do you really want to give a 17-year-old $250,000 who hasn't played it down for you and may not play it down for you for a couple of years? Excuse me. Talking a lot this morning, 31 minutes in. We're living, but are we thriving? Doesn't matter. But I think it's interesting that he got really fired up here because I think that maybe, the best coach in college football who's won national championships in this sport in this era, maybe it's different. I don't know exactly what rules Georgia's bending or breaking, or it doesn't matter. They all are. So don't be that obtuse. But I think when he's saying it matters. People care what he says. It registers because he's the best at the sport of what he does. It also leads me to believe that he may not be doing this for very long. And again, like he's got kids that are still like in grade school and everything like that. He's working at his alma mater. He's thriving at his alma mater. He's coaching. He's kicking serious ass at his alma mater. I don't think he's going to be done winning two national championships. He may win more, but like I could see him, I don't know, being done before he's 60. Maybe when he's 55 or something like that. I just think that the name and the day and age of college football, it's just getting way too transactional. And I think he's well equipped to this. I mean, he was a finance major at Georgia. He was a good student. He loves this place. They're paying him a lot of money to do this, but like now you can understand why coaches who are at lesser jobs who aren't as good leave for the NFL. I mean, why do you think Jeff Hafley left Boston College for to be the Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator? Chip Kelly didn't want to be in charge of it all at UCLA. He's an offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Now he's the OC for the Raiders. I know I'm blanking on somebody else who left for the NFL too. What Chip or Jim Harbaugh, but that was to be a head coach. I'm blanking on whatever. Oh, Scott Loeffler. There we go. He's going to go be the quarterbacks coach at for the Eagles after being the head coach at Bowling Green. So every job is different. Not everybody has all the resources of Kirby Smart, and even if you do, you have to combat with that. You have to combat with largely unregulated boosters and collectives and everything like that. That's kind of the issue. Maybe the Deloitte run a clearinghouse called NIL Go. Yeah, I remember that now. It's my brain. Maybe that'll help. Maybe that'll help in some capacity, but there will always be loopholes with this because college football is big business. And when there's money to be made, seedy people will attach themselves to it. That's just how life is. So I appreciate Kirby Smart saying those sort of things. It really resonated with me. It's a sport wide, it's a college sports wide issue. Hopefully somebody resolves this. Maybe we do need a sports czar. Let's move on to the second half of our show with next topic here, which is always be creative, of course. Yeah, there we go. Oregon is losing one big name recruit after another in the last 3 months. Is Dan Lanning slipping? And I don't remember all the names of all the players, but I believe there have been five. I think there's been like they're all 4 or 5 stars who have decommitted from Oregon. And I don't think it's slipping per se, but I am concerned. Um, I'll say this about Oregon. Oregon has won enough games over the last 25 years to be in the spot of college football where it is. They're at the table of maybe some of the best, but they haven't won to the degree of anybody else. They've never won a national championship. And I'm not saying that it never will happen, but like they're at the point right now where it could. We're talking like what Auburn was up to pre-2010. Like they hadn't won one since the 50s, but they did do it with Cam Newton. And they played for national title in 2013. So Oregon, whether that be Phil Knight money from Nike, whether that would be recruiting nationally, whether it's the Spaz uniforms or whatever, like they found a way to earn a seat at the table as college football new money, if you will. What um what I think is happening is maybe Oregon's being affected by this. Maybe the Phil Knight money and the uniforms aren't landing the same as everybody else. Again, I'm not the biggest fan. I love Dan Lanning. I love what you're here for Georgia, and I think he's a fantastic coach, and I hope he gets it right there. But there's also something about Oregon's brand. Oregon's brand's just soft. And even when they try to be tough, it doesn't land well. Um, I think there are people out there in the country who are prospective recruits who are very impressionable. They love the uniforms. Like, oh, I got to wear that. Oh, I got to wear Nike. Oh, I got to do all this. But then I think it attracts a certain type of player that I think in crunch time situations doesn't deliver. And it's a similar vein for like the same type of player that is attracted to Texas A&M. If you're about the money, you'll go there because they can just provide more because they just drill baby drill. But then you end up with guys like Shamar Stewart who are defined by money, who got 4.5 sacks over 3 years or however the hell he played there, still hasn't signed his deal with the Bengals because it's about the money. At some point, you got to produce. And I'm kind of wondering with that with some of these recruits over at Oregon, like if maybe word's kind of gotten out, maybe they're like, okay, Will Stein's going to leave for a job. This has been an offensive run program with a defensive minded head coach. Maybe there's something potentially better out there. Maybe, I'm not going to stay committed. And I think it also leads me to believe that, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's something that Kirby Smart said next year. And I don't think Oregon's that team, by the way. I don't want to put it on anybody's blast, but like, people are kind of coming and going. And I think when people are kind of like gradually leaving as a recruiting class that late into a cycle, it should raise a cause for concern. Like Oregon has been a top 10 recruiting program throughout the last 10 or 15 years, or since I've been writing for the most part. To this point, they've won one playoff game, and that was back in 14. Maybe, maybe just the data of it all just resonates with him. Maybe having to play a bigger travel schedule, having to play in the Midwest so much. Maybe there's exposure, but then you're not playing as close to home. There could be all sort of factors here. I will say this: Oregon's on a handful of about 8 or 12 teams that I think could win a national championship, probably in the lower end. But last year was the year for them to do it, and they didn't do it, and they looked pitiful in the Rose Bowl versus Ohio State. I understand it was a rematch of the regular season, but you won. You got to win those games. And I'll say this. I need Oregon to prove it to me. I think that like I kind of always feel like we move the goalpost up for them across the board. We did it with Chip Kelly. We kind of did it with Mike Bellotti a little bit. We did it with Mario Cristobal, maybe Willie Taggart at some point. We're doing it now with Dan Lanning. Like we got eventually you gotta punch it in. Like and I think Oregon will. I just don't know if it's going to be this year, but I think that Lanning is going to be the right guy to do it. I think he needs to level up as head coach. I think that he needs to be a little more locked in key moments. I think he's got to be able to have his guys playing with a cohesive level of toughness. So, if they get punched in the mouth, can they get back up and they can fight? Because I've seen it happen before a couple of times where it gets out of hand very quickly. It happened to Ohio State last year. It happened versus Georgia in his first game there. where's the game where you go in there and you just slobber knocker Colorado like you did in 2023? Like that's the Oregon. If you play like that and you do that, you're ready. You got to do more than just beat Penn State. It doesn't beat anybody who's as good or better than them. So maybe there's something larger at play here. Maybe it's just a trend, maybe it's a coincidence, but when does it stop being a coincidence? That's really all I got about this. I don't need to dive into Dan Lanning's successes or failures. I'm pulling for him. I want Oregon to prove me wrong this year. I want Oregon to really go out there and kick some serious tail because I still can't get the Rose Bowl loss out of my head. Moving on to our penultimate topic here, we're going to go with some Big Ten energy. Uh, LSU head coach Brian Kelly mentioned that SEC head coaches are in favor of a scheduling partnership with the Big Ten. The Big Ten, not so much. The Big Ten would be more on board once the SEC gets 9 conference games. Eventually, I think that that's going to happen. I think that the two best conferences in college football are kind of dealing with the scheduling issue. The Big Ten's like leaning to, oh, we play non-conference games, but we don't play, some of us don't play anybody in the non-conference. I'm looking at you, Nebraska, or try not to. And then you look at the SEC, it's like, well, our conference is just better top to bottom. If we add another game, that's just another way to self-cannibalize ourselves. And then you end up with more teams in the playoff, like Indiana at 11-1, who wouldn't have held a candle to an SEC team. As I was reading this, I misread it initially. I actually have a better solution. Let me take a sip of coffee here and I'll get it to you. This isn't necessarily about the amount of conference games you're playing. I do like the idea of having a league that you play like competitive balance game with. And based on size, so I would actually argue that the SEC should play the Big 12 and the Big 10 should play the ACC and include Notre Dame in that equation. Because in the SEC and the Big 12, you have 16 teams. The Big 10, you have 18. The ACC, you have 17. And you add Notre Dame as a loose attachment to it. So that's easy. Whatever place you finish in your league, that's who you play next year in the opposite conference. So if we would have done that, and again, it kind of the Notre Dame of it all, like you got to figure out how to factor them in there with the ACC. But you'd have Oregon playing Clemson, and then you'd have Georgia playing Arizona State. Like that'd be a house divided here for sure. But I think also that would help with travel too. The Southwest or like the Texas part of it all with the Big 12, it's makes it a little bit easier with the SEC because you have overlapping states there with Texas and Florida, and I'm sure I'm missing another one as well that has teams in it too in the SEC and the Big 12. But then the Big 10 and the ACC, you got like the Midwest and the Atlantic. There's some crossover there. Travel's not going to be as punitive. And I think that's a start. And I think eventually we'll get the Power Four teams. The Power Four leagues all have the same amount of teams in each conference, and then they'll play some sort of round robin thing like scheduling rotation, like the NFL. Like I think that's the biggest thing that college football needs. You all play 8 or 9 games, and then you play, a couple of other teams in scheduling rotation, and then if you have a conference rival, like you will still want to keep like Cyhawk going. You still want to keep clean old fashioned hate going. You want to keep Commonwealth Cup. You want to keep all those rivalries that are in state of significance going for sure. But you know, I think the SEC is in favor of playing more good games. They just want everybody else to play good games too. But you also have to remember that every school is different. There's some teams that run towards competition, and there's some that run away from it. And it's in every league too. This isn't just like one league's more cowardly than the other. Like in the ACC, Clemson does a good job of scheduling tough people in the non-conference. They play South Carolina every year. They got LSU this year. They played Georgia last year. These are all games they could lose. They lost to Georgia and they lost to South Carolina last year. They could lose at home to LSU. Georgia doesn't well, they still play Georgia Tech this year. They don't play anybody of significance in the non-conference outside of Tech this year. But you played Clemson last year. You tried to schedule Oklahoma, that got pulled out from underneath you. You're playing Louisville. Alabama's playing Florida State. Texas is playing Ohio State. Then there's also programs where it's like Nebraska seems to be wanting to pull away from that. And I don't really see Ole Miss actively trying to schedule a bunch of people. Cody Williams talked, and I talked about this on the show. North Carolina, I mean, they're playing two teams in the non-conference in the Power Five this year. They're playing TCU and UCF, I think, is who they're playing, if I'm not mistaken. TCU for sure. I'm blanking on the other. It might be UCF. But like, you owe it to your fans and you owe it to like everybody to try to schedule the best games possible. And I'll touch on a program here. Nebraska did do it, but like we'll see what that is. But like just being able to schedule more games that we're not going to see all that often in the non-conference is good for the sport, as opposed to, Behemoth University versus Cupcake State. So, I like the idea of the SEC playing the Big Ten. Maybe the ACC can play the Big 12, but like, the SEC's got 16 teams and the Big 12, Big Ten's got 18. I know that they've done stuff in the past where like different conferences play each other in college basketball. Not everybody plays a part in this like multi-conference showdown, if you will. I just want uniformity in some ways because like when you have uniformity, it's easier to kind of judge who's the best. But in reality, the only way you can judge who's the best is by playing the games against each other in the non-conference. That's why non-conference is so important. That's why playoff games are so important. That's why bowl games are so important. That's where bragging rights are made. Because you could be like SEC this, Big Ten that, ACC this, Big 12 that. But it doesn't matter. It comes down to how well you play versus the teams that you don't play regularly. Because, we all know that the rivalries and the traditions in each conference are so important, but, you grow the sport, you grow the brand by, going out of your comfort zone and playing somebody else. And more importantly, you grow when you go out of your comfort zone, life and every other avenue out there. So, again, I am in favor of this with what Brian Kelly mentioned, I think to Brett McMurphy of the Action Network about this. So, yeah, I'm in favor of it all for sure, but I think it's the wrong conference. I think it should be the SEC playing the Big 12 because they have the same amount of teams. And I think the Big Ten and the ACC should play with Notre Dame joining the ACC. Plus, also with Notre Dame there too, it's like you have the ability to reignite some Midwestern rivalries that you lost by, leaving the Big East and joining the SEC, joining the ACC. So like you could play Michigan State more, you could play Purdue more. Maybe not necessarily with a rotational bounce. You play Indiana a little more often, even though you just did. Like, I know, I think that like by doing this, you get more good games. And if you have like bottom of the barrel, so if you have bottom of the barrel SEC versus bottom of the barrel Big 12, you've got Mississippi State playing who would that have been in the Big 12 last year? Who was the worst team in the Big 12, if I'm not mistaken? God, Arizona. Like that's a way. Maybe they did even play. No, Mississippi State played Arizona State. But like that's a way to kind of build up equity. It's like, hey, we beat you guys. This is a win for us. We're moving on up, and you're moving down. You're still bad. It's a way to keep it fresh, and I think in time it's just too logical for us not to get there. I'm glad that coaches seem to be on board with it. It may not happen when Brian Kelly is coaching at LSU, but it will happen in my lifetime. I can't wait to see it happen. And moving on to our last topic here, we're gonna do some do Host or do Host here with myself. This is about a program that's a hot button topic here in college football. We're talking about Matt Rhule and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. This is a team that did not play its spring game, and it also got out of its non-conference game versus Tennessee. Tennessee went out there. I think they scheduled Georgia Tech instead, and like I kind of want to see that, form like the Bobby Dodd Bowl. Give Tennessee credit, give Georgia Tech credit for doing this, on the fly. Nebraska pulling back, like what's the win there for Troy Dannon to do this? What's the win for Matt Rhule to do this? But kind of on the topic of Nebraska, this is year three for him at Nebraska. Year three at Temple for him, they won 10 games. The Owls won 10 games. Year three for him at Baylor, they won 11 and won the Big 12. Year three for him with the Carolina Panthers, he got fired after 5 games by going 1-4. Never won more than 5 in a season in Charlotte. So do Haas or do Haas, John? Do Haas or do Haas, Bueller? Will the Matt Rhule pop year happen this year? I'm gonna go do Haas 1S. And I did this because I wrote about this yesterday for fanside.com. Definitely check it out. So I tried to unpack this a little bit here. Um, Look, Nebraska fans deserve a winner. And I looked at the Cornhuskers schedule. So here's what they got. Um, they're non-conference. You've got a neutral site affair versus Cincinnati out of the Big 12 at Arrowhead in Kansas City, home of the Chiefs. Then you got a home game versus Akron and a home game versus the Houston Christian Huskies. And then you're looking at it from the Big Ten standpoint. Your first conference game is versus Michigan, but Sharon Moore is not coaching in that game. It's also at home. Then you got a bye. Then in October, I think it's pretty manageable as well. You host Michigan State, you're at Maryland, you're at Minnesota, which I think could be very tough. And then you host Northwestern. And then in November, that's where it gets challenging. You host USC, a team you lost to in Los Angeles last year. Then you go on the road to UCLA, a team you lost to at home a year ago. Then you have a bye. Then you have the toughest game of your schedule at Penn State. And then you host Iowa, I think on Black Friday for Cornucopia. So looking at this, like what signifies a Matt Rhule pop here? Nebraska did go to a bowl game last year. That's usually what happens in year two. Year one, it's usually pitiful. Although year one for Nebraska, they went 5-7, so not that bad. Matt Rhule pop year historically has meant you're going to win 10 games and you're going to be playing in a conference championship. No, I don't see Nebraska getting to Indianapolis because I think the top of the conference with Ohio State, Penn State, and even Oregon and Indiana and Illinois, they're just too good. But you could potentially crash that party. And I'm looking at it from this perspective. Outside of the Penn State game, you could win all of them. Like Michigan's vulnerable. Is Minnesota going to be as good as I think it is? I don't trust USC. UCLA might have a ceiling, but I think that they are moving in the right direction under Deshaun Foster. I was a tough game, but again, I was just like 7-5, 8-4 until Kirk Ferentz decides that they're 10-2, and he holds that over everyone's head. So basically, what I got at is the reason I said do host 1S yes is because I think there's a chance if you win that Cincinnati game, you can win your first six games of the season. So you got Cincinnati, Akron, Houston, Michigan. You have a bye, and then Michigan State. You don't play your first true road game until October 11th at Maryland, who might be the worst team in the Big Ten this year, maybe outside of Purdue. Maryland's going to be really rough. Then you got a road game back to back at Minnesota. That could be tough, but again, rivalry. I think that's the broken bit of chairs rivalry. Now that I'm thinking about it, you win that game. Maybe maybe you get to 7-0. Um, and then Northwestern still a team without playing in a true college football stadium. I feel bad for David Braun in the situation where like you just don't have the resources you need right now, and when you do, you can get back to being a damn good football coach. Then you got the two California schools. You got one home, one away. And then you got Penn State and Iowa. Like if you get into the final four games of the season and you're 8-0, I would like to think that you're playing with a lot of momentum at that point. And even if you split the pair, you're going 10-2. If you go 10-2 in the Big Ten, you might be making the playoff. Depends on where you get the quality win there at that point. I mean, maybe you get a quality win over Michigan, maybe you get a quality win over Iowa, maybe USC or UCLA or Minnesota are good. But but if you lose to Minnesota, I looked at it from this perspective. Nebraska's floor this year is 7-5. Their ceiling is probably 11-1. And I think the truth is they're probably going to go somewhere about 9-3. And look, 9-3 at Nebraska is not the same as going 10-2 at Temple or 11-1 at Baylor. Like it's different. I think winning 9 games at Nebraska is a massive deal. It may not necessarily guarantee you a spot in the playoff, but it shows that you've arrived. You've gotten to where how we view Illinois right now. more so how we view Indiana, how we look at, South Carolina and the SEC. Like if you win 9 games at Nebraska, you're back. You're essentially right there. You're playoff viable now going forward. And it all comes down to Dylan Raiola taking that next step, in Dana Holgerson's offense. Again, Dana Holgerson's overqualified to be an OC. But I think it's going to work out better than him and than what they have with Marcus Satterfield. They just don't hire a Satterfield. A lot of Satterfield in that first game there with Nebraska and Cincinnati. But like the more I look at it with Matt Rhule and Nebraska, the schedule opens up very nicely. They have opportunities to gain momentum. They got to close down the stretch in November. They got to be mentally tough. But I think Rule's a bit of a front runner. When he has momentum, it works on his side. And I think guys who've been playing in the system now for 3 years, they'll have more defined roles. I expect the black shirts to be flying around. They'll be very tenacious on defense. And the best part is like I'm kind of hedging both sides of my bets. I think Nebraska's going to have a good season, but there's also a chance that they may not. I mean, I think they what 33rd in SP Plus rankings, which only really has them middle of the pack in the Big Ten. I may like, Washington more than them, but like maybe their schedule's a little bit more navigable. But yeah, I'm open to the idea of a Matt Rhule pop year in Nebraska. I think it's probably going to be closer to 9 wins than it's going to be to 11. So that's kind of what we got here. With all of that, this was episode 179 of False Start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can follow the show. You can follow my absent colleague, Cody Williams, at the Sizzle 20. You can follow the show at CFB False Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Give us a 5-star review. I want you to hit that like button like Rod Carew, and I want you to smash that subscribe button like Jose Canseco on steroids. Yeah, that's what I need you to do here. Hit it like the Offspring, smash it like the Offspring, hit and smash like the Offspring. I know you want to hit that, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, a little bit more housekeeping stuff before I close up the show today for you guys. Again, I will be coming on here Select Cup on Monday. Cody will be in North Carolina, and then we're going to be recording at the Ass Crack of Dawn on Thursday because he's going to be in North Carolina on next Thursday. So he'll be back on June 5th, and then on Monday, June 9th, we are going to be doing the league themed episode. So, be sure to have your Mr. McGiblets costume ready. Don't eat some Yabagoya. Make sure you find out where Russell is. You know, it is decided. Forever unclean. This is what the show is all about, and this is False Start.